Hey, I'm Derek, it's me, Derek, and welcome to Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Video game peripherals are not just dumb fun, but they can also sometimes help you appreciate your video game collection a little more. Welcome to the test desk, aka my desk, and we are going to dive deep into the PlayStation mouse. When Sony decided to come for Sega and Nintendo with the PlayStation, they also came correct with a mouse, which was kind of a bold thing to do at the time. The PlayStation launched with this thing, and games supported it all the way through to the 2000s. The mid to late 90s were kind of a golden age for console mice. Super Nintendo, PlayStation, Dreamcast also launched with a mouse, even the Sega Saturn, and of course the rare Japanese-only N64 mouse, which I've covered once before. Over 70 games used the PlayStation mouse, FPS, RTS, shooters, puzzles, adventure games. Games you might have in your collection and in many cases are improved with the mouse. This video was actually chosen by our supporters on Patreon. I was actually surprised that a ton of people didn't even know this thing existed. We have polls semi-regularly for episode topics, and you can vote for future SSFF videos by joining the Patreon. We are inching closer to our goal of 1,100, where we pledge to buy a Zeebo so we can get first-hand time with their incredibly strange ports, including the Resident Evil 4 port. Can you imagine the deliciously stupid stuff I could do with the Zeebo? But anyway, like I said, the PlayStation mouse had a ton of support, so I decided to dig deep into what I have in my collection, which is finally up to find all of the secrets. Welcome back to Punching Weight, a celebration of the weird, ambitious, and unnecessary, and this is Secrets of the PlayStation Mouse. Like all console mice made in the 90s, the PlayStation mouse is analog with a rubber ball in the middle. Trust me, I'm an expert. I guess I'm kind of the YouTube expert on console mice now. A boxed copy, which I managed to scoop up a few years ago, but for a little more than this $7.99 GameStop price tag, costs a little more than that. These actually came with a PlayStation mouse pad. And it's actually the only mouse pad I still own. Other than that, there's no scroll wheel, and it only had 2 buttons. While the lack of a scroll wheel isn't so uncommon, the Mega Mouse for the Mega Drive/Genesis, and Shuttle Mouse for the Saturn, and Mouse for the Dreamcast all had more buttons, so that's kind of a bummer. And the cord is just about the same length as the controllers. Again, the mouse launched with the system predating the first DualShock by a couple years, so it's not totally off base to think of this as the PlayStation 1's first analog controller, though it was not the first attempt to bring high-fidelity controls to players. Anyone remember the Neg-Con or the Jog-Con? Oh, video games. Good stuff. Anyway, let's get to the games. The 5th console generation was not just the golden age for console mice, but also when the first-person shooter really came into its own on consoles. PlayStation couldn't quite compete with mega hits like Turok, GoldenEye, or Perfect Dark, but a small few compensated with a mouse that could be programmed to work in tandem with a controller. It is basically a keyboard and mouse. You know, this is also a perfect example of riding the line of peripheral insanity just right. Sony stopped right on the line, but Sega smashed through it with full keyboard and mouse hookup on the Dreamcast. But hey, all this stuff was cheaper than PCs back in the day, so what are you gonna do? Of course, you know where this is going. It wouldn't be Punching Weight if we didn't mention some Doom. But not Doom, the good Doom. Instead, the lesser Doom on PlayStation. Final Doom.
You don't have any jokes?
That's the joke.
The joke is
like,
this game's existence.
This game's, yeah. Yeah. This game is a joke. Grace, that is the joke. Final Doom, that's the joke. Okay?
Okay.
Final Doom is still a solid Doom. It's got that spooky soundtrack that I've always really loved, but it runs a lot poorer and is more composed of maps from the master levels than actual Final Doom. But unlike Doom, Final Doom has mouse support. For the record, Saturn Doom has its own mouse support too. I guess it's like the one thing that it has over the PlayStation version. Anyway, this port of Final Doom came out in late '96 when FPS controls hadn't been locked down yet. Hell, FPS, first-person shooter, was hardly even a term yet. Everything was just still a Doom clone. So having mouse support in this port was pretty forward-thinking, though it still falls a little short. There is a decent amount of controller customization, but only with the face and shoulder buttons. You cannot change the D-pad bindings, so lefties unite! Okay, I actually can't mouse with my left hand, but if you can, switch up them face buttons. What saves this port for righties like me is that double-clicking either mouse button is use. This is something I had not realized for a really long time, but that's my bad because it's actually in the instruction book. It is absolutely wild that anyone was thinking about this type of stuff in '96. So here's how it is. You got controller in one hand, mouse in the other. You got left click is shoot and right click is set to strafe on, which by the way, strafe on turns your left and right turn to strafing. So you still can't circle strafe, and also there's no auto run option, but it's still pretty playable. You know, Final Doom, maybe I was being too hard on you, but you were still built on a house of lies. Like I mentioned earlier, PlayStation Mouse launched with the system. But then, why didn't this Doom have mouse support? I wanted this one to have mouse support. Why did Final Doom have mouse support? The only reason I could come up with is that id's follow-up PC stunner Quake launched between these two ports, and maybe that game inspired Williams Entertainment to add it to the Final Doom port here. That might also explain why the Saturn Doom port has mouse support, since it came out a couple years after PlayStation Doom. Both PlayStation Dooms play fine with a controller, and as much as I'm on Final Doom, the mouse setup does sweeten the pot a little bit for me. But Final Doom ain't got nothing on its big brother stunner, Quake 2. Weirdly enough, the PlayStation never got a Quake 1 port, though the makers of the fantastic Sega Saturn port, Lobotomy Studios, shopped around a PlayStation port, but for reasons I can't explain, no one was interested. Maybe it was timing, because Quake 2 fully utilizes the then pretty new analog DualShock. Some of the presets for the analog sticks are absolutely bonkers. However, with the mouse, it runs like a dream. You got circle strafing, you got jumping, you got looking. It's all here. It also doesn't hurt that this version is in fact pretty solid. But here's the thing, this game has 4-player split-screen deathmatch, and if you have 2 multi-taps and 4 mice, everyone can play with controller/mouse setup. And this isn't even some Faceball 2000 deep dark secret, by the way. It's right there in the instruction book. Who in 1999 had 3 friends with PlayStation mices? I don't know, but this is just about the most punching weight thing possible. I've mentioned this in videos before, and I've been slowly growing my collection to one day be able to do this. But as you can see, I got a ways to go. Oh, and FYI, we didn't try this with every game, but I emulated the PlayStation Quake 2 on PC just to see if I could get a computer mouse and keyboard going on it, because we're nothing if not thorough. This is what you came for. The more I dug into my collection, the more I wanted to be able to play other games with the mouse. Medal of Honor, Disruptor, Mega Man Legends, Jumping Flash, a personal favorite of mine, would all be so cool with the mouse, but none of these games support it. And that's because games need to be programmed to use the mouse. Either devs put in compatibility or they didn't. That's just how it goes. For example, Jumping Flash predates both Quake and Mario 64 and basically revolutionized 3D graphics. So it's no surprise it didn't also revolutionize 3D controls. Lil Robbit could only do so much, okay?
Robbit can do the job!
But one game that did revolutionize 3D controls was Alien Resurrection. Not to be confused with Alien Trilogy, an Alien game that didn't try to reinvent the wheel. Alien Resurrection did not review amazingly at release, but it has got to be one of these systems' biggest underrated gems. Made by Argonauts, the studio responsible for X, Star Fox, and Croc, it's no surprise that Resurrection is something special. I mean, beyond being a great horror title with awesome atmosphere and lighting, it might be the first game to have what is now the standard way to play FPS controls on a console, and it was thoroughly criticized for it. What I'm trying to say is this game is the Galileo of console FPSs. I will die on that hill. But what about when you throw a mouse into the mix? Dude, it's even better. It's not perfect. I think overall Quake 2 runs a little better performance-wise, but Alien Resurrection is trying for so much more. You're limited on ammo, aliens can take you down extremely quickly, this is a survival horror game, and the mouse definitely helps your reaction times. I'm no expert on the Alien franchise, but I will say that if you enjoyed Alien Isolation like I did, you can think of this as an indie demake version. I don't know, please check it out.
Okay, I got a new game.
Alien Resurrection on PS1.
Tag.
Thanks, Derek.
I'm sad to say that despite having dozens of great FPSs in its library, Final Doom, Quake 2, and Alien Resurrection are the only 3 first-person shooters that use the PlayStation mouse. But there's still lots of shooting to be had. with light gun games. Yes, light gun games. Now, without getting too technical, light guns won't work on your modern flat screen TVs, only the tube TVs of yore. I have so many light gun games across multiple generations that I have not been able to play in years. But now, thankfully, I can, or at least a few of them. Let's start with Die Hard Trilogy from English developer Probe. Released in 1996 when there were only 3 Die Hard movies, this is a 3 games in 1 set. Die Hard 1 is a third-person romp through the Nakatomi building. Die Hard with a Vengeance is a crazy taxi-style race through New York. And Die Hard 2, Die Harder, that was the name? That was really? Alright. Is a rail shooter explosion fest through the airport. All 3 games are pretty good, but for me, the star has always been Die Hard 2, and with the PlayStation mouse, I can finally experience it again without needing a tube TV. Which is great because this is still one hell of a crazy light gun experience. It's just sensory overload, like the camera is whipping and zooming all over the place, every surface is destructible, there's power-ups everywhere, people are yelling and screaming, there's this guy who's kind of pretty good, sounding like Bruce Willis is talking all the time. You can shoot all the innocent people you want, it doesn't affect you. For f***'s sake, how many terrorists are there? Oh, and when you get hit, the entire screen ripples, and that's bad enough because there's explosions and stuff happening everywhere already, and all with a pretty rock-solid frame rate, it's still a sight to behold and makes Virtual Cop look like a slideshow. And the music kind of slaps too. This game, using the mouse, is kind of a big deal for more reasons than just being able to finally play it on a flat screen TV. See, even if I did have a proper tube TV, I wouldn't be able to play this game because there were multiple PlayStation 1 light guns, and this is not the one that I can use with it. For example, the Namco Gun Con is the best one and actually the only one I own, but it came out mid-generation and doesn't work with every shooter, like Die Hard here. Early on, Konami's Justifier was the standard bearer, but there are numerous light guns for the PS1. The ability to play with the mouse, it's not only cheaper, but takes up way less space in your home than a proper tube TV and an assortment of different light guns. And for the record, if I also had a copy of Area 51, which I don't, I'd be able to use the mouse with that too. Thankfully, these aren't the only 2 light gun rail shooters that use the mouse. When it comes to light gun games on the PlayStation, nobody crushed it like Namco. 2 Time Crisis games, 3 Point Blank games, and all of them certified dingers. And not a one works with the mouse. Or that's what I thought. You see, none of these games state they have mouse compatibility, but still, I had them, so I booted them up just for the hell of it. And of these 5, the first Time Crisis does in fact work with the mouse. This is again, not advertised anywhere on the case or in the book or anywhere on the internet. Am I the first idiot to test the PlayStation mouse on all these games? Probably. But there could be a reason for this. The mouse works just like the Gun Con, and I mean just like the Gun Con, meaning there is no reticle to help you aim. It does play, but not at all like you'd want. Time Crisis was bundled with the Gun Con. It was the flagship Gun Con game. I got the big deluxe editions of Time Crisis 1 and Point Blank 1. That is actually how I got my 2 Gun Cons. So why would you want to draw attention to the mouse? But then also, why even put the option in there? Playing with the controller, there's a little blue dot to help you aim, and there's that blue dot for the menus with the mouse, but not in the actual game? Time Crisis is not an easy game, but one I've been able to beat. But playing blind with the mouse, I couldn't even get to the first boss. I tried over and over and over, couldn't do it. Could not do it. The clock beat me every time. It was a crisis of time! I couldn't go fast enough! But I'll be honest, it's nice just to play this game again, even if only barely. Thankfully, there's a pair of light gun shooters that were forward-thinking enough to support the mouse. Next, it's Project Horned Owl from Alpha Systems. Right on the back cover of the book, it even advertises that the mouse lets you enhance the destruction. Horned Owl is a pretty interesting little gem. Released in 1996, seeing this much anime and mecha in an American game was rare. This was way before Crunchyroll and Toonami, kids. Anime was barely a thing over here. So it gets points for that. One thing I found interesting is how you reload. Instead of some combination of buttons like in Die Hard or Time Crisis, you whip your reticle to the side of the screen instead. It kind of simulates shooting outside the screen to reload. Also, the terrorist group in this game is Metallica.
We have reports of Metallica terrorist activity on the Metro Highway.
For real. Only one L in this Metallica. I guess that's all you needed to avoid the wrath of Lars Ulrich? Good thing this game was entitled Project Horned Napster. Overall, I don't have much to say about this one. It's neat, but the real star is Alpha's follow-up shooter and spiritual successor, Elemental Gearbolt. This is a classic and a real hidden gem for the system. More anime cutscenes, a pretty rich world and story, though most of that's in the book, gorgeous orchestrated soundtrack, and its own awesome take on the genre. In Gearbolt, there is no reloading, just 3 weapons with different strengths and shooting speeds that you can switch to at any moment. This makes it much easier for the mouse. However, it's a pretty demanding shooter. The meta of the game is finding all the fairies hidden in stages for bonus points in order to level up your character faster. Without these extra points for higher levels, the later stages only get harder. Unfortunately, there's no option to increase mouse sensitivity, so it's baseline more difficult to react in time to make the shots you need. It's a tough game already, but with the mouse, you gotta play on practice difficulty. But it's still a solid way to experience this amazing game without a light gun and tube TV. I could make a whole video about this game. In fact, I did! Way back in the prehistoric time of 2012. Damn, kid, there ain't no pandemic going on back then. Get a haircut! There's actually one more light gun game of note that does use the mouse, Ghoul Panic. This is another Namco GunCon joint, but it only came out in Japan and PAL. It breaks my heart because it's supposed to be a lot like Point Blank. I guess I'm gonna just stick with that DS port. There's another game I want to point out, Gunfighter: The Legend of Jesse James. This is a bull-faced ripoff of Time Crisis. Not really a bad one, so I'd actually recommend it. However, no mouse support, but I just wanted to give it a quick shout out. Here's one you're probably curious about, Resident Evil Survivor, aka Resident Evil Gun Survivor. While the spiritual sequel, Dead Aim, on the PS2 has mouse support, this one does not. But this game is such a garbage game, there's still enough fun, air quotes, fun, to be had with just a controller.
I think the game was supposed to be played like you walk around with this and you shoot with this hand, so maybe the game is supposed to be kind of streamlined. Maybe. But even with a gun, it wouldn't matter where you shot them. That's stupid.
Back in the day when people thought PC mouse games, they weren't thinking of shooters as much as they were thinking about adventure games. Adventure games were also an important niche in Japan, so really, this is what the mouse was made for. Well, not Clock Tower, yes. Yes, no, Clock Tower is exactly what they made the mouse for. Let's all thank Clock Tower. Probably only a handful of weirdos like me play Clock Tower with the mouse. Play Clock Tower with your mouse. It's so good. And play Clock Tower.
Spoilers.
Period. Spoilers to the video we made 6 years ago, guys.
Spoilers for the rest of this video.
This is what they were made for. Spoilers, they're going to talk about Clock Tower in a second. Spoilers for the video. We're not actually talking about Clock Tower yet in this video. But stay tuned for Clock Tower. And there are plenty of adventure games to go around. Myst, Riven, Discworld, XCOM, SimCity 2000, Snatcher, Police Knots, Tokimeki Memorial. I know a few of you will never forgive me if I didn't at least mention Broken Sword. The mouse was even bundled with a sim game called A-Train, or AIV Evolution Global, though I don't think I've ever seen this bundle with my own eyes, but this might be the only game that came bundled with a PlayStation mouse. The only PlayStation mouse bundle, as far as I know. But of course, the first series that comes to mind when I think about adventure games are the Clock Tower games. Clock Tower is still a PlayStation horror classic, and the mouse just makes you want to play through this whole game again.
Oh, shit.
It's been 6 years? Oh my gosh. And the mouse is great here, adding some extra fidelity. Hey, Scissor Man, meet Mouse Man. Fun fact, the original Clock Tower on Super Nintendo did not support the Super Nintendo mouse, while the Japanese-only PlayStation remake, Clock Tower First Fear, does have mouse support. Really, that's just another point in the column for that remake. And of course, the elephant in the room, Clock Tower 2 Struggle Within, aka Clock Tower Ghost Head. We're gonna get this out of the way real quick here. I do not recommend you play Clock Tower 2. Grace asked me to put Clock Tower 2 on the TV here. I said no, I won't do it. Don't play that game. I have 2 copies of it for some dumb reason, and neither of them is on the screen right now. So much I don't like Clock Tower 2. Don't do it. I love bad games, but this is the most obtuse, poorly planned, half-baked horror game I've ever played. For example, if you don't happen to look at this suit of armor in the very beginning,
ooh, spooky.
It'll arbitrarily kill you like 7 hours in, and that's it. Boom, game over, start over from the very beginning. Do not play this game. But if you are going to play this game, you might as well make it as pleasant as possible, so yeah, I would recommend the mouse. To be honest, my PS1 adventure collection is pretty sparse. In terms of mouse compatibility, the only other game I own is Dracula Resurrection, which is a port of a PC game. I'm not too familiar with this game, but like you'd expect, the mouse is a nice touch. It's not like these games are unplayable without the mouse, but I'd say if you got one lying around, you might as well. Or if you are a big fan of adventure games and got a lot in your collection, you should get a mouse. One adventure game I do have that does not support the mouse is D. It makes sense that it doesn't work, but this is Kenji Anno we're talking about, so I had to double check. Nah, doesn't work. But anyway, this has been your public service announcement. Play D. It's available on Steam and GOG and other stuff. Play that game, it's amazing. Anyway, if you have watched this channel over the years, you know I have a very special place in my heart for real-time strategy games on consoles. The very first episode of Punching Weight covered an RTS on the damn Game Boy Color. RTSs were made for a full mouse and keyboard, and consoles struggled with this for years. Now, there aren't that many RTSs on the PlayStation, but shockingly, there were 3 Command & Conquer games. However, only the 2 Red Alert games have mouse support, and they work great. I mean, Command & Conquer Red Alert's UI is pretty simple, and I don't mean the game is simple, I just mean it was ready-made for a controller and works great with the mouse. I was always more of a Warcraft 2 guy, and it's upsetting that the PlayStation mouse doesn't work with that game. I wonder about the Saturn port, though. And I'd say it's equally disappointing that PlayStation Diablo does not have mouse support, but the numerous console ports of Diablo 3 have proven that Diablo on a controller is more than possible. This has always been a solid port, by the way, and lack of mouse support does nothing to change this. Here's a weird one, Baldies! This RTS was actually a Jaguar CD debut. That version never came out in Japan, but this PlayStation port hit Japan in '98, while North America and PAL had to wait until 2003. Anyway, this might be the last PlayStation mouse game released, and what is even going on in this game? This is definitely not the same as Command & Conquer and Warcraft. Oh, and Worms! Does that count as a strategy game? Yeah, why not? I've read in some places that this game is mouse compatible, but that is not true at all. Ain't no mouse in these Worms. I'm not even sure why you'd want to play with the mouse. A controller is easier to pass around, which is what this game is all about. I mean, sit on a couch, multiplayer, pass the controller around, classic stuff. Moving on, there are so many different kinds of games on the PlayStation. What about puzzle and arcade games? Well, I'll tell you, not enough work with the mouse. But here are some interesting ones. Like Lemmings. Spoilers again. Spoiling the video again.
They're so cute.
I know, they're dancing and they're gonna...
Are they gonna bonk?
They're probably gonna blow up, I don't know. Lemmings and oh no more Lemmings. I feel like every time this game is brought up, you need to make a disclaimer that Lemmings don't suicidally yeet themselves off of cliffs. In real life, the reality is that they're just really bad at migrating sometimes. And hey, that's kind of what this game is all about. This is a PC classic, so of course, this has mouse support, and of course, it's great! It's too bad you can't use a controller in tandem to help scroll the screen or something like that, but what makes this port work is that right-click pauses the game so that you can make quick, clutch decisions. Classic game, classic way to play, maybe the best port and the best way to play Lemmings on a console. But it is not the only Lemmings. That's right, Lemmings 3D, or 3D Lemmings, I don't know, the often forgotten PlayStation launch title, and boy, it's rough. Early 3D was some weird shit, folks. The trouble here is the camera. There are like a million controller presets, and moving the camera is just a pain. With the mouse, I think you have a little more camera control, but this game is rough. And there are 80 levels. Little optimistic, but you know what? I appreciate your confidence. You got moxie, kid. The most ridiculous thing about this mouse is how long it was supported. Like this Atari Anniversary Edition. It was released in 2001 after the PlayStation 2 had already come out, but it has mouse support for every single game. Asteroids, Missile Command, Breakout, Tempest. And the mouse is not a bad substitute for the trackballs and paddles that these arcade classics had. And what's great is the various remakes of these games also supported the mouse. Arkanoid Returns, Breakout are 2 examples, but the one that I have is Tempest X3, or X sub 3, or just X. This is an updated version of Tempest 2000, an Atari Jaguar classic, with its super flashy graphics and pulse-pounding techno soundtrack. I remember thinking that it was the coolest and hippest game I had ever played back in '94. Did that cool lady just say Super Zapper Recharge? That is so cool. Tempest X3, or whatever, takes that style and cranks it to 11. Even flashier, better graphics, more music. It's a pretty great port and a pretty great time capsule of mid-90s techno aesthetic. The problem is that Tempest X3 doesn't advertise anywhere that it has mouse support. And guess what? This game was harshly reviewed for its bad controls, and those reviews weren't wrong. However, with the mouse, I think it is a much better experience. Then again, I don't know how anyone is expected to clear this game's 100 plus levels. It's an extremely tough game that's best in like short bursts, but I still recommend it if you can find it for cheap. So Arkanoid and Breakout each got PlayStation remakes that use the mouse, but here's a weird one. Sorceress's Maze, an Arkanoid and Breakout clone with amazing cover art. I'll admit, that's 100% the reason why I bought this game. Oh, and they used it on the title screen? They really believed that was a good picture. This game is a no-brainer for the mouse, and it does use it, but not this version. The Japanese version, which was called Prism Land Story, has mouse support, but the PAL and North American versions do not. This might be the only time mouse support was ever removed from a game. And why? This game came out in 2002. It's not like that stopped Baldi's, but this cover art, dude, I just can't stay mad at you, Sorcerer's Maze. Oh, I left the mouse cursor on screen. That's so embarrassing. I have a special place in my heart for useless peripherals, but the PlayStation mouse absolutely justifies its experience. I mean, like most things punching weight, you could go your whole life without ever needing one, but I'm still happy I get to play Elemental Gearable on a flat screen TV. I want to thank our Patreon supporters for picking out this topic for the video. All of their awesome names are right here. You can join their ranks if you want to support Stop Skeletons from Fighting. But hey, if you cannot do that, times are crazy right now, and if your finances cannot do that, just keep watching, keep subscribing, keep liking and commenting. Next time somebody says, hey, what's a really fun YouTube channel? What's the dumbest YouTube channel you can think of? Tell them about Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Tell them about Uncle Derek. Tell them about producer Grace, and you tell them that I'll see you again real soon. Thanks for watching.